Welcome to today's session on the NIST Cyber Security Framework. My name is Amber Matta and I will be your moderator. I am the marketing manager here at Cyber Security and I'm very excited for you to hear what we have to share today. For those of you that haven't joined us before, we are Cyber Security and we are a managed security service provider, and we're dedicated to protecting SMBs and nonprofit organizations from cyber threats and also helping them comply with the latest cybersecurity regulatory requirements. At the bottom of your screen, and I'm sorry if my arrow is a little bit off, but there should be a Q&A button at the bottom. So if you have any questions or comments during the session, please feel free to utilize that button. We would love to hear anything that you have to tell us. The message will get sent directly to me and to Mike, who is our presenter today, and we will address those questions at the end. If we happen to be running a little bit over and we can't get to your question here, I will address it in a follow-up email either later today or tomorrow. Of course, there will also be a recorded version of this webinar, and it will be available probably by tomorrow. I'll also have it posted on our YouTube channel and probably our social media as well. Speaking of social media, as your marketing manager, it is my duty to tell you about our social sites. After today's webinar, please keep in touch with us via our social media outlets, which are listed here, and our blog as well, which is on our website. We have some upcoming stories and we'll be sharing exclusive content on our social channels, so make sure you're following along. And lastly, I would like to introduce you to our president and presenter, Mike Giuffrida. Mike has the executive experience dealing with cyber incidents, so today he's going to walk you through the process of aligning your cybersecurity program with the NIST Cyber Security Framework. So welcome, Mike, and let me unmute you. You're on.
My name is Mike Giuffrida, president of Cyber Security. I am responsible here for developing and delivering secure support and security programs for the small to medium-sized business market. We have chosen this space particularly because we believe the small and medium-sized organizations have been underserved from a security standpoint, and the need in that space is just as large, if not larger, than it is in the enterprise space. One question that we are always asked early on is, why do I care about security? I hear, my business is too small, nobody's going to care about what I have nothing to steal. So I figured I'd address that right up front before we dig into the meat of all of this. To begin with, as a general rule, hackers are lazy, and being lazy, they want to do the least amount of work possible to be able to gather the most amount of information and ultimately, reach the largest goal, make the most money. So they try to infiltrate organizations en masse in order to get many sets of small amounts of data and put that data together to be able to sell it on the dark web, or find many organizations that they can infiltrate for smaller amounts of ransomware and be able to collect all that money together to be able to make their living, quote unquote. You can't see my air quotes. However, the easiest way for them to do that is to target organizations with less defenses. Large organizations have a lot of defense out there, and as we've seen in the news, they're still not 100% secure. There are ways to infiltrate those organizations, but it does take a lot more effort for a hacker to get through several layers of defense than it would to get through few or no layers of defense. They'll target a small organization using phishing, spear phishing, email spoofing, social engineering, or even look for current flaws in software and hardware technology. So for example, as you hear someone tell you that Windows 7 is going out of support, or Server 2012 is going out of support, what that essentially means is that there's going to be no more security patches for those pieces of software. And when the opportunity comes in for a hacker to break into one of those, they're going to exploit that as much as they can. It doesn't matter the size of the company based upon the fact that if they can get in, they can get something. If they can get something, it's worth it to them if they didn't put forth that much effort. Essentially, SMBs are a large target right now. Almost half of the attacks that happen are against small and medium-sized businesses. And one of the latest statistics I've seen is that over 60% of those organizations will go out of business within 6 months of a major attack. This is the heart and soul of America's economy, and we're here to try to help protect that, educate those people, and help them stay in business and do what they do well. So there's a lot of talk about technology, a million white papers, a lot of organizations out there that discuss ways to protect your organization. And the one that we've chosen to align with is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. This is a federal agency that puts together resources in a lot of different areas, but particularly in this area, they're focused to try to help small, medium-sized businesses stay abreast of current technology and security standards, allowing them to protect their organizations from attacks. They have a small business cybersecurity corner here. You'll see the link there. I believe Amber will be sending these out later. Different kinds of planning guides, tips, training materials, et cetera. So if there's an organization that has the time and bandwidth to go out and try to learn this, some of these best practices, the information is freely available. They also always encourage you to report any incidents to the FBI, which is fantastic. I think anybody should do that. However, I think we all know that the FBI is probably not going to be chasing down each individual instance of ransomware or phishing attack that happens out there, because there's just too many going on. So it's good to report them, but it's probably not going to help you, and it's not going to help your business stay afloat. One of the best resources we believe they've developed is called their Cyber Security Framework, and we call it the CSF for short. This framework is what we're going to focus a little bit on today, and talk about how you can align your organization with the standards set out in this framework. So the goal here would be able to align yourself with the standards that are set out within this framework to be more secure. The goal here is not to be in compliance. You cannot comply with the cybersecurity framework. There's 108 different controls in the framework that cover lots of things that are also required in different types of compliances, such as HIPAA and GDPR and the New York DFS law, et cetera, et cetera. But the framework itself, you do not get a certificate that says, okay, you're in compliance. It's really a tool that allows you to develop a plan for cybersecurity investment strategy within your organization, to look for best practices to aspire to based upon your business need. And one of the things that we've really found it useful for is developing a common language for the IT folks to be able to talk to the business folks and coordinate how they're going to communicate cybersecurity risks throughout the organization to ensure that they have the resources they need to properly protect and defend their organization. So let's just look at the framework as a quick overview. To begin with, the framework has 5 core tenets. The first is identify, basically understand what you have in your organization. Protect, which is to figure out how you're going to defend that stuff, how you're going to protect the things you identified in tenet number 1. Detect, which is ongoing monitoring for breaches and different types of infiltrations that may be happening. Respond, which is controlled, looking at ways to respond when a breach happens. And then recovery, which are the tenets necessary to be able to get your business back up and running to 100% after a breach has been thwarted and you've responded to what's there, but now you need to get yourself back up to sea level to be able to continue to run your business at full capacity. The way they implement this is that as an organization, you want to put together basically your target profile. So you go through the 108 different controls in the cybersecurity framework and figure out, of those, which ones are most pertinent to your organization. There are many that are appropriate for every organization that's out there, and then there are some that are a little more specific. If you're not using third-party distribution channels, then maybe in a control discussing whether or not those people have access to your network doesn't really matter to you. But the core tenets around things like data flow, data security, data backup, data encryption, those types of things are all appropriate for every business that's out there. Once you figure out what that target profile looks like for your organization, you then do an internal look and create your current profile. The way to do this is by going through an assessment of the 108 controls and determining, what are you doing today? Do we have these policies in place? Are we backing up data? Is data at rest encrypted? All the different things that they ask throughout the assessment will help you determine where you are today. When you marry that up against the target profile, you'll get a gap analysis. That gap analysis essentially serves for what you have left to do to get as secure as you've identified you want to be as an organization. Again, this is not like a HIPAA compliance where you're going to necessarily check off the 4 boxes and say, okay, we've covered that compliance, let's go back to work. This is about making your organization more secure every day. Once you've gone through that gap analysis, they've defined 4 different tiers to indicate where you are in the cybersecurity ecosystem. Tier 1 they call partially implemented, and as that, it's defined as you have no formal processes in place. Essentially, you're waiting for something to happen, and when it happens, you'll deal with it. Tier 2 is called risk informed, which means you understand what's going on out there, you're paying attention for what's happening, but you have no formal policies in place to deal with it when it does happen. Tier 3, they named repeatable, and repeatable means you have policies and procedures in place, but not a ton of tools to deal with incidents in real time that happen. So you may detect what's happening, you've got policies in place to try to defend and defer against some types of attacks, but you don't have the tools in place to deal with it on a real-time basis as things change. And the most evolved of the tiers is called adaptive, and that is an organization that's implemented enough controls in their organization to be able to deal with attacks on a real-time basis. When things happen, they understand quickly how to isolate that attack, how to reduce the threat surface that's happened, minimize the damage done to their organization, and recover quickly. So there's a lot in there, and so what we've tried to do is break it down into a 4-step process, which will allow organizations to slay the dragon, for lack of a better description, piece by piece, as opposed to looking at this as one big mountain that they have to climb. So step 1 in the 4-step process would be to assess the current controls you have in place. Look at your organization, figure out what's there, and figure out how you can control the data you have in your organization. Step 2 would then be figuring out, where do you want to get to? So we figured out where we are. Now we want to figure out where we want to get to. Again, that is really a deep dive into your organization and the security assessment to determine what's appropriate for us based upon what we have, what we really think would be important for our organization to make sure that we can stay viable and profitable and continue to do the things that we do on a daily basis. A lot of people get through step 2 and get overwhelmed. Once you've got this gap analysis in place, you can look at it and say, oh my goodness, there's 16 or 60 things that we feel like we need to do. This is just too much. Oh, look, the phone's ringing. Let me go get that phone. Oh, my email is dinging. Let me go take care of those emails. And they conveniently slough this off to the side and get too busy to be able to deal with it. Unfortunately, at that point, you've not really done anything that beneficial for your organization. And so what we recommend you do after going through the gap assessment is create a plan to measure your success. In a situation like this, small wins can be huge. And so we recommend you put a plan together, which essentially turns out to be your project plan for figuring out what's most critical for your organization, which ones can we tackle today, is there some low-hanging fruit that we can get out of the way and check off of the list, and how can we lay that out in such a way that is appropriate for the budget that we have and the needs that we have from a security standpoint. Once you put that plan together, it's time to just tackle item number 1. If there's 60 things on the list, don't worry about the next 59. You want to implement item number 1 and put yourself in a situation so you can have ongoing control of what you're doing within the network. Make sure that you set aside some specific amount of time, resources, et cetera, to ensure you continue through your plan and put things into place that allows you to be flexible as the world of technology changes, that you're paying attention to what else is happening out there, and you have controls in place as soon as you get through those portions in your plan to be able to protect your organization. So this here as an example on step 1 will show you an example of one of the controls that you would look at from the assessment. When you're going through an assessment, one of the controls could look like, how are you handling threat information today? And you choose, detected events are analyzed, we aggregate that information, alerts are thrown out. As you go through all the different controls that are out there, the answers that you provide will provide back some sort of a criticality for your business based upon priority and risk, as well as some information about how to properly remediate the things that are gaps within your assessment. Once you've gone through the assessment, this is sort of the result of what you would see from a visual standpoint. And so this, to begin, would just give you a heat map that might show you what you have from a risk standpoint, and things that are in the green side. Again, if you could hover over each of these dots, if it were real time, you would be able to see what each of those controls are. Here's an example of users are informed and trained. Well, if your answer is no, that's pretty high criticality in an organization, as users are one of the largest potential breach points that happen. So notice if you answered no to that question, you're going to be in the far upright corner as far as impact and probability of a breach happening. And that's something that you want to tackle fairly quickly. When you get these results, you're going to wind up with a lot of information here that you can share with the board from a risk management standpoint. And being able to share with the stakeholders what this looks like from a risk standpoint as opposed to from an IT standpoint gives you the benefit of having that conversation about how to protect your organization going forward. Another view that you receive after going through a gap analysis is having a list of all of the different controls, how they rated from a risk standpoint for your organization. So for example, the top risk areas on this example here, again, all users informed and trained is a critical issue that has not been handled. Cybersecurity roles and responsibilities for the workforce and third parties have been defined. If that's not the case, that's critical for the organization, because when something happens, you want to be able to respond quickly. So all of these things would be listed out by a certain set of criticality, and also a set of remediation steps that would be necessary to resolve each one of those items. Based upon what the remediation plan is for any particular item, you can then put together a budget and a project plan for being able to deal with these things over time. So an example of a way we handle this with some of our clients is looking at in their annual planning, and this goes, is updated on a quarterly basis as well, going through what are the most critical items, where's the low-hanging fruit that we think we can take care of, what's the tenant within the NIST domain that this is talking about, one of the 5 pillars, and then when do we think we're going to do that? And as you start to get your arms around each of these, once you prioritize them, you can start assigning dollar figures in there and really having a real way to measure and plan for your security spending as you've defined it appropriate for your organization to protect yourselves going forward. And this is just a simple template here that we've used, breaks out the next 4 quarters and then what it's going to be in years 2 and 3. And as you roll forward, quarter 3 is going to fall off, and then we're going to be in quarter 4, and quarter 3 of 2020 will jump onto there. It would be a rolling plan, because one of the things we like to make sure people understand is that security is not a destination. Security, we like to look at it as a way of life. Things change over time, priorities change, business changes. Maybe before you weren't doing any international business, but now you are doing international business. Therefore, some of the controls may change for you. You may be under a compliance that moves other stuff up the list, et cetera. Step 4 is really about getting this all done. So you want to follow a set of standards that you put in place, set forth those controls based upon the priorities you've outlined, and try very hard to keep on schedule with getting that stuff done, because you spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was there and determining what was right for the organization. This is not like other strategy efforts that wind up being a binder on the wall. This is a living, breathing effort that you have to deal with every day to make sure you're continually improving the security of your organization. You want to utilize tools and technology that help you align with that. Make sure that you're looking for ways to thwart the most common types of threats. Advanced threat detection tools are a big part of today's world, because old school tools like antivirus have become easier and easier for hackers to get around. So there's always new ways to try to thwart the threats that are out there. Use those tools and technology to help you stay in alignment and stay in control of your organization. For each of these items, you want to establish an annual cost-benefit analysis. Make sure that what you have in place is still needed. Make sure that if something needs to change, you change it, and whatever the next thing is based upon the current priorities of the organization, you keep that conversation going. We like to deploy at all of our organization clients a defense in depth strategy, which essentially means there are many layers of security, and that just makes it more difficult for a hacker. If they get past one, there might be another one there to stop them. Defense in depth strategy would allow them to be able to keep hackers out, and when they come in, reduce the amount of damage they can do as much as possible. And one of the most important things to continue doing at all times is making sure you're testing the waters. Do penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, phishing tests, awareness training, things in your organization on a regular basis to ensure that security stays a top-of-mind conversation for everybody. It's not something that, oh, that's what Jimmy did last year, but it's what everybody thinks about every day. So a few tips to remember about what we've talked about today. Again, the NIST Cyber Security Framework, most promising framework that we've seen to date for small and medium-sized organizations. It's very attainable, because it's scalable for different types of organization sizes and industries. Don't start from scratch. Assess how your posture compares to the CFS standards. Don't just try to throw the next security thing at the wall and hope that you're filling the gaps that are necessary. Start with a program and a profile like the NIST Cyber Security Framework. Leverage everyday tools to assess your current state of security and get to your target profile. There are several types of assessments that are available out there. We do them for our clients all the time to determine where they are today and what kind of gaps may exist. This is not a 2-minute effort, but it's also not a 2-month effort. So it is very accessible for a small, medium-sized organization to get through the assessment effort. It takes a few hours up front and then some time to go through together what the results of that are. But at the end of the day, you wind up with some pretty valuable information about how to protect your organization. And most importantly, make appropriate investments in technology to close the gaps that are out there. My guess is that most of the people on the call today, based upon what we've seen, do not have a cybersecurity budget line item. That's not normally what we see. What we see is an IT support line item, something to that effect. Actually, Amber is going to throw a quick poll out, if she wouldn't mind, and just a yes or no. Do you have an IT budget for security today? Amber?
It is launched. You can keep going. We'll come back to the
Great.
results afterwards.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So those are all of the basic things I wanted to cover today. We do have a few minutes left for questions. Amber, have any questions queued up that you want to share?
I have one right now. Hold on, am I unmuted? Yes, I am. So let me address that one first, and then we're also about to run over as well. So let's see if you can do this in a timely manner, Mike.
Yep.
I actually really like this question because it's probably something that's on a lot of people's minds, but maybe they're kind of nervous to ask it. But what does it cost to comply with the NIST Cybersecurity Framework?
Thanks, Amber. Yeah, we do hear that one a lot. To begin with, you can't comply with the cybersecurity framework. It's really just a set of guidelines and best practices to be able to help yourself become more secure. So the answer would be different for any particular organization, and it really depends upon what happens when you go through that gap analysis and how many gaps are found. And that really allows you to go through and spread the investments that you do have to make over the appropriate amount of time for your business based upon how secure you need to be.
Awesome. And I think I just have the results to share of the poll, and I think we're all set. But it looks like 60% don't have a budget yet and 40% do. So it's kind of going along with what you were kind of anticipating as well.
Excellent. Well, I thank everyone for attending today. On behalf of the entire staff here at Kyber, I want to thank you for taking the time to spend time with us here. Amber will be sending out the slides after the event. Amber, do you have anything else you want to close with?
That is all. I'll have the slides, the Q&A I'll include in there, and also I have an additional piece of literature that I will send as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mike. You did a great job. Have a good day, everyone.
Have a great day.